Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy and Jeff Kopsa.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast. And thanks for hanging out with us for another episode. Thanks for being patient. Actually, not thank you for being patient, because we are actually getting more episodes out at a quicker pace than we once did. So thanks to us for getting more content out to you guys, the average listener. So, Jeff, how are you doing, my friend?
Great. I'm ready for another exciting episode.
Yeah, me too. You had to stop and get Petro and your DeSoto?
Yeah, I had to get some motion lotion.
Yeah. How's the DeSoto treating you, fella?
Man, it drives like a dream, man. I love driving that car so much, and I don't go far in it. I live about 4 miles outside of town, so Sundays when I'm at the hangar here or doing a podcast is kind of when I drive it. But every time I drive it, I'm in a parade. People are honking, they're waving. I actually caused an accident outside the high school one day.
Oh, now you know what it feels like to be a hot chick crossing the street.
Exactly.
Now, do you keep bias ply, like air-correct tires on that, or do you have modern-day tires? I mean, how far do you go with that thing?
Yeah, so the guy that I bought it from, he actually replaced the original set of tires. He went with the original, the big fat white walls. Mm-hmm. They're not, you can tell when you're driving it, it's not a modern tire.
Sure. Well, I mean, not only that, but I'm sure it takes getting used to. I'm assuming they didn't upgrade the brakes. You probably got drums all the way around.
No, yeah, little brake cylinders and no power steering.
Is that thing 3 on the tree?
So actually, it's 4-speed, but it's a fluid drive. So if you're familiar, and they came out kind of like in the late 40s.
Sure.
They had the Hydramatics, and they call them Slushomatics, and then Chrysler had the fluid drive. So first and second is just up on the tree. And you basically shift. Once it reaches a certain RPM, you just let off the accelerator. You'll feel it shift, and you go again. And now you're in second. And then you just shift down on the tree, and now you're in third. And same thing. You let off, hit a little more, now you're in fourth. And it was designed to where you didn't have to sit and ride the clutch all day long.
But you do have to downshift when you're slowing down, right?
Nope. You can leave it in high, third, fourth gear, come to a complete stop, never hit the clutch, and then go again. You're just in third.
It doesn't stall out like when you're taking off?
Nope. It drives like an automatic. Like I can't leave it in gear on an incline and it won't roll. It'll still roll. It's like an automatic transmission. It's
just weird though that you can keep it in third and then stop and then take off in third, and without, I'm sure it probably doesn't have the get up and go. Not that it has a whole lot of get up and go, but it probably even slower at the go. It's probably more like tractor speed at that pace, minus all the extra torque.
It's the same exact motor you see in like 3/4-ton weapons carriers and the ambulances from World War II. It's
really?
That same inline. It's the same exact motor.
Inline 6, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that upgraded to 12 volt at some point, or is it still running off? What was it, 9 volt back in the day? 6 volt?
It's a 6. It's a 6 volt positive ground system.
What? Positive ground?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You can run it either way. When I bought it, they had it set up as negative ground. So I put it back to positive ground and repolarized it, which you basically just hot wire it. You arc it. You arc it.
Wow.
And then you repolarize the generator. So, yeah, it's weird. But you start it every couple days, and, man, it runs like a champ,
Now, for those watching on the YouTube channel, who's that behind you there? Is that, I see that's obviously it's a mannequin. Is that a standard M1 helmet on him, or is that the one with the flip up ear flaps?
Yeah, it's got the ear flaps on. I'm glad you mentioned that. So this is one of the new exhibits I'm building at the Highland X Air Museum. So this is like our east wall, and this is all going to be redone. If you're familiar with O clubs in England during World War II, or any scene from like 12 O'Clock High, where it's a big white brick wall with the 8th Air Force mural painted on it, all the missions and everything. That's what this wall is going to turn into. But right now, it's just basically a Norden bomb site, some oxygen bottles, and there's a ball turret site and a big Sperry turret or a Sperry gun site for B-24. And then, our 2 mannequins. We got one guy kind of dressed this way.
Yeah, in the
like
flight suit.
And then the other guy, like a gunner with the ear flaps and the fleece lining and everything.
How that leather looks like it's just flaking off at a alarming rate.
Yeah, it's in pretty bad shape. But we actually just found another set of trousers in the collection that are like immaculate. So we'll probably eventually change them out.
Is there a way to, I don't want to say preserve, but to slow down that flaking? Is there can you Scotch guard it? But I'm sure that would just kill what value's in it. Is there a way to prevent the flaking?
No, yeah, something needs to be done. I mean, it is an artifact, so it's not like it's a value thing. The museum's not going to sell it.
Sure.
We definitely need the longevity out of it. So I use, for all my stuff, like flight helmets or gloves, or either like the leather navigator case. I use the Hubert's shoe grease that you get when you buy your Boondockers.
Okay.
Yeah, you can. I guess I don't know if it comes with it or if it's an option to buy it separate. I've got a couple cans of it. Same stuff they used back then. It's like a saddle soap.
What if I told you that Ralph Lauren made damn near 100, I want to say 98% accurate Boondockers for hipsters to wear?
I could buy that. Like the rough outs?
Yes. No. Yes, but to the Marine Corps specs without the rivets on them.
Okay.
The reason I say 99% accurate is because they did not go as far as putting the nails in the sole.
Yeah.
But they actually have the corded sole. I was actually, a lot of times when I go on eBay, I will just put in generic terms, kind of like somebody who would post something that they don't know what they have. So instead of looking for a haversack or a musette bag, I'll type in World War II backpack or battle pack, and you'll find stuff for a cheaper cost simply because the person who's putting it up there doesn't know what they have. And so sometimes it'll be overpriced or sometimes it'll be way underpriced. And so I just make it a habit every once in a while. I'll just go on eBay and just type that in. And I typed in Boondockers, and I came across some that were not made by, actually I found a pair that are made by Red Wing, but more importantly, and I'm trying to pull them up now, there were some made by Ralph Lauren. Now, the ridiculous part is, since they're made by Ralph Lauren, they're retailing for $500. So they're not a good substitute for World War II impressions or at the front when you can go on there and get theirs for $99. But I'm looking at them, and they are dead ringers. Like I said, they actually have the corded soles, the same exact sole print.
What about the laces? What do the laces look like?
I'm trying to find one. I'm browsing through eBay now. I thought I had some on here. Here they are, Ralph Lauren. Okay, I'm going to hold this up to the camera, so this ain't going to help you guys who are not watching, but you have to go on YouTube. So here is, of course, now my ring light's on there. See that? Look.
Wow.
Now, hold on. Wait till you see the soles on these things. Yeah, so here's the side view. They have the white stitching in the right spot. The soles are the same color. They have the same shoelaces. Here's the overview. And they're not like the What Price Glory that are super thin. These look like... Now, here, actually, these, interestingly enough, have the nails on the bridge of the foot, but not around the horn of the shoe. So this is one version. Now, they have another version of Ralph Lauren where the soles have the different type, the corded soles with like the rings on them.
Uh-huh.
And, but yeah, so it's interesting. Ralph Lauren makes rough outs and Boondockers for hipsters, but they sell them for $500. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's like the same manufacturer who makes the rough outs for our websites. But once again, the biggest difference is a lot of them don't have the nails in the sole. But other than that, the treads are perfect, and too bad they go for $500, because if they went for like $150, they'd be a perfect substitute for people who can't afford $300 ones. But they are, spitting image. So if you want a good laugh to yourself, just go on eBay, type in Boondockers. There's a lot of modern day work boots that are called Boondockers, but then you'll find the ones by Ralph Lauren, and then Red Wing makes a pair, but they're super expensive too. And they look dead nuts on. I actually found a guy who was selling a pair of used ones, and the current price is going for like $260, but then they quickly got to $250. I'm like, well, at that point, you just go buy them from World War II impressions and have the exact correct ones. But it's interesting that appearance of boot got so trendy that Ralph Lauren made a pair.
Right. And I guess he's selling enough to justify making enough of them.
I can't remember who it was. There was a famous fashion designer who teamed up with PF Flyers, and they remade a pair of the olive drab green PF. They remade the jungle shoe. They look just like the shoes that the Raiders and the Merle Marauders wore, except for they were the height of your normal Chuck Taylors. They weren't the knee-high ones. But those things were going for like $700 because they were limited edition and they had the fashion designer's name taped onto them.
Right.
And ever since they came out with those, coincidentally, PF Flyers stopped making the normal olive drab green ones. Because I did see a video where somebody got a hold of the olive drab green ones and then they just took the PF Flyer patch off and they dyed and painted the soles black and they basically created their own version for doing reenactments. But you can look all over and you'll be hard pressed to find a pair of brand new. Even if you go on PF Flyer's website, you can order custom ones, but they do not offer the olive drab probably because of that exclusive contract they had with that fashion designer.
Yeah.
Here's something we don't get to do too often on this podcast. I want to play this little news clip real quick. Happy birthday to this World War II vet out of Cincinnati, hitting 104 years old.
New tonight, a surprise birthday parade for a local hero. We've seen a lot of these during the pandemic, but maybe never quite this big for a man reaching this kind of milestone.
This birthday parade comes complete with a marching band.
It's so nice when you can get a large crowd to really rally behind the veterans because they've done so much for us.
This crowd is coming in at about 100 vehicles deep.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Because Robert Doolin is impressive.
You don't look a day over 103.
He's 104 years old. Even more impressive is his service in World War II.
When I got shot down, we were running away from the plane.
Trying to escape, he traded his St. X class of 1935 ring for a sandwich.
I couldn't be wearing a ring with English printing on it.
Doolin was captured by the Gestapo, eventually moved to Stalag prison camp. He was freed by Patton after more than 1 year in 1945. Remember that class ring? When he came home, a classmate called the manufacturer.
Make me a brand new ring, exactly like the other in 1935.
St. X may hang around his neck now to keep it close to his heart.
He's been back so many times, talked with our kids about his experiences. There's no place we'd rather be right now.
Bob Doolin can say the same.
I think it's great. I'd like to see 105.
Heck yeah. We asked.
Now, Mr. Bob Doolin is located in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm going to put a little phone call into Xavier High School to see if I can get this gentleman's phone number. But more importantly, I did some Google searching, and I do what I always do. I went on Facebook, and I found a Facebook group out of Cincinnati, Ohio called IGY6. I Got Your Six with a Kiss on the Cheek and Other Veterans Adventures. And they have a birthday operation coming up for a gentleman next month. And they also did something for this Mr. Bob Doolin guy. So I've reached out to them to see if they can kind of help maybe send some veterans our way to get some interviews and get them digitized, get their stories out there. So hopefully here soon we can get some more veteran interviews going on here. But I think it's super awesome what these guys are doing all through Hamilton County and outside of Cincinnati and through Ohio. They just find these veterans and throw, drive-by birthday parades for them and things like that. It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
So a happy 104th to Bob Doolin of the 8th Air Force. So, yep, I'm going to head out that way.
Did you find any more? Could you find any more information about that particular when he was shot down and what aircraft? Anything like that?
No, I basically found this like 10 minutes before we went on the air. So that's why I haven't reached out to, I literally was doing show prep, saw this news story, found the Facebook page, sent them a message. Sadly, there's no, for a community like this, they only have 94 members, but there's no message button. So I had to post what I hate doing. People thinking I'm just trying to get some, publicity. I'm like posting a public page about, hey, I'm looking for interviews, but they didn't have an option to send a private message on here, which I wish they would have, because I would have much rather preferred to do it that way. But I will put my pride on the line and, post a semi-pestering comment on there if it sends people our way. So, and for those you listen, if you anybody, family, neighbors, otherwise, who may be interested in doing an interview, email us at mailcall@WTSPWorld2.com. So, Jeff, I I know you covered the things you had going on behind you. Have anything else going on at the museum that you wanted to get out of the way before we get a little further into what we're going to do tonight?
Oh yeah, I'd like to kind of brag on our team and our squadron here. We just hosted a record crowd for the 29th annual Bluebonnet Air Show right here in Barnett. It was just this past Saturday, 20 March. We typically, it's kind of bounced around the year a little bit. It used to be in April, and we did September, and September 2020 just wasn't going to happen, so we pushed it to the right again to this past weekend. And yeah, record crowd. It was incredible to see. We had, the A-10 Air Force Thunderbird demonstration team coming back, had a couple A-10s in there doing their thing. The Falcon flight, I don't know how many SNJs and T-6s. We had That's All Brother. Of course, that's the famous C-47 that led all of the other C-47s at D-Day. That's been restored and painted back to its D-Day markings. That actually, they had a couple guys jump out of that. And one guy, the last jumper, had like a 1,200 square foot American flag,
nice.
Unfurled as he's coming down while the anthem is being played. That's kind of how we kicked it off. But yeah, then of course the Air Force brought a P-51 to kind of do a heritage flight with the A-10s. We had the Devil Dog, the big blue B-25, but it's, I guess technically a PBJ, the Marine Corps version of the B-25. And then my ground forces, kind of had their inaugural run, if you want to say, at the air show. Here is a new living history group that I'm building, and kind of pulled from a whole bunch of different places in the state, really. I mean, had guys coming from North Texas, from Houston, from San Antonio area.
What were their primary impressions? Were they doing Air Corps impressions?
So I did Air Corps, and one other guy did Air Corps, and then I had the Army recognized General Patton reenactor. You can look him up on the internet, Denny Hare. He's a friend of mine. He came out with a couple guys to do his thing. Then I had a couple girls that sing. They were in Army WAC uniforms. I had Navy Wave. I had, of course, Roger the Riveter there. So we were just a little bit of everything. We did weapon demos.
Nice.
We demoed the Springfield, the Garand, the carbine, a BAR, the trench gun, and then we had two German reenactors there. One guy did his M31 Sumi with the drum mag on it. So people got to hear some live Class 3 stuff. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, a semi-cheap and easy impression. If you're trying to throw more background noise into like an Army Air Corps type thing, just get some guys in some HBTs and have them flip their bill of cap up like this, and you got yourself ground crew. Just put a couple wrenches in their hands, and they're good to go. So that's kind of what we did with some of our guys when we did that Memphis Bell. We all had our air uniforms on, and then a couple of guys just put on their HBTs and flip the bills up on their hat, and it's air crew. There you go. Yeah. Don't need web gear or anything. Maybe a wrench in a pouch and a toolbox if you can find one at a thrift store somewhere.
Exactly, yeah.
But congrats.
So, yeah, it's been fun. It's been great. Got some new recruits in and got to show off some of what we can do here at this little museum. And for a town our size, we basically had almost just as many people that live here that showed up for the air show. That's
awesome.
It was pretty big. We were pushing, last I heard, it was somewhere about 4,500.
Wow. And that
was a lot of people.
That's great to hear, especially coming off of with all the craziness and all the lockdowns that have been in place. That's definitely much needed. And as we've talked about in the past, how kind of things are hurting as far as attendance and living history. Real quick, we're talking about Mr. Bob there was celebrating his 104th birthday. And I got to thinking in the 8 minutes of show prep that I did on this. In our short time on the Big Blue Planet, we've experienced a lot of things. We've experienced going from dial-up internet to high-speed internet to flip phones to smartphones. But in his 104 years on his planet, what are some of the most groundbreaking inventions that this guy has seen in his lifetime? Let's just start back from the beginning. I won't read through all these because there's so many of them, but I'm just going to go through them at random. 1914, the motorized movie camera. So it was right around the time he was born. 1915, Pyrex came out, glassware. Before that, I mean, think about how do you cook a casserole without Pyrex? And we know that, 1916, the electric power drill. 1917, radio tuners. 1919, the pop-up toaster, which I don't think the pop-up toaster has changed much since 1919. 1920s, the hair dryer. 1921, the modern lie detector. 44, kidney dialysis machines, clock radios, disposable diapers. The first pager was in 1948. I'd hate to see how big that son of a gun was. Alkaline batteries were 1950, but I have a little caveat with that, because how are you going to say that the first alkaline battery was made in 1950 when the EE8 telephone ran off of 2D batteries? Were they not alkaline? Were they made of like liquid, something else?
Something else, maybe, yeah.
Maybe alkaline is a patented or copywritten, kind of like the difference between a hot tub and a sauna. I don't know, but clearly the technology of what that was around before then, because
we had flashlights in the First World War.
Yeah,
we?
so but maybe I don't know. Maybe they were made up of something, a different type of acid, or I don't know. 1951, power steering. Okay. Let's just fast forward a few years. 1960, the Kodak Instamatic. 1963, plasma television. 1964. What's that?
Space travel.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm just skipping around here.
Plastic.
Black and Decker cordless drill, World Wide Web in 1989. 1990, the Nintendo Game Boy. 91, Super Nintendo. How did the Game Boy come out before Super Nintendo? Palm Pilot, the Dyson vacuum cleaner, 93. I mean, basically, this guy has seen everything. Obviously, the telephone, modern cars, the digital thermometer, 1970. The Commodore 64, let's not forget about that. The Sony Super VHS. There's just so much. I mean, we want to talk about, when we were kids, we didn't have the internet. When this guy was a kid, they didn't have anything. They had hoop and stick.
My dad often says that my dad was born in 1950. He said, there will never be another century like the 20th century.
No.
There will never be a span of 100 years where we went from pioneering flight to, what we have today, in just that short amount of time. Anything that we do now, and he makes a great point, said we've already invented everything. All we do now is invent improvements of what we already have.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's probably, it may not be the best statement. It may not be accurate, especially with like medical technology. Like, I'm sure there's breakthroughs that we've never had before, but when you go from like pre-penicillin,
yeah, right.
And things like that, like
guys in the iron lung,
really just an improvement. Yeah, we've got different surgeries that we can do and all these crazy things, but what have we really invented? And maybe there's somebody else that has a great answer to that. But to me, what has been for the 21st century? That's not just an improvement or an advancement of something that didn't already exist. But the 19th century, the 20th century, you could say that a lot of stuff just didn't even exist before this guy was born.
Now, I live in a swamp. I live in Florida. Could you imagine living down here before the advent of air conditioning and mosquito control? We have what we call the Lee County Air Force, and they will fly over in Hueys, like Vietnam era Hueys, and then like Cessnas, and they literally spray in all the undeveloped areas for mosquitoes. And then we have trucks with a giant triangle net on the back, and they drive around the communities misting for mosquitoes. I could not imagine living down here before mosquito control and air conditioning. It would be insane. Like the town I live in across the river, Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and Firestone all had vacation houses down here. And back in their day, there was, you go over to the Edison house and there's a ceiling fan that he built, and it's still running to this day. It's pretty crazy. But let's, we kind of hit around about this, I think, a little bit last podcast. Let's talk about some World War II movies, good and bad. Do you have a list? Or I'll let you go first. You want to throw one out? Let's go with a good one. If you're talking to somebody, they say, hey, I really never really got too much into World War II, movie or TV series. What's a good one? What's one you think everybody would to ease their way into it, to start them out?
It's funny you asked that. I actually had a colleague that asked me that same exact question. She sent me an email. She said, "Hey," she said, "I really need to catch up on my Pacific War history. What are some movies that?" And she goes, "From all decades. What are some?" And I mean, one of my all-time favorites is probably, as dorky as it's going to sound, I just love San Diego. And that's not one you say, "Hey, this is how it was. This is the accurate one," But it's just to me, it's just kind of a good, wholesome war movie. And maybe I'm partial to John Wayne. I don't know. I grew up with it, but that definitely hits one of and Patton. They're definitely up there as some of my favorite entertainment movies. Not like, okay, you need to watch this and learn from it.
Now, do you think some of those older movies like San Iwo Jima or even Patton, because let's face it, nowadays our movies are straight get to the action right now. We don't have time to waste with drawn out plot line, character development. People don't have the attention span. Do you think some of those older movies, that long burn, might give them trouble, getting interested in the concept?
Absolutely. I mean, you got to hit people within 6 seconds or they're going to swipe to the left or swipe down or whatever on their phone. I mean, you got to hit them quick, but that's how movies were back then. And if you're trying to understand history, then you kind of have to get into that mindset. You can't look at history through a contemporary lens. It's just not going to work.
Sure.
And I read a great article from Turner Classic Movies about doing just that, how they're making a push, all these movies that are considered, racist and, demeaning and all these things in today's world. While they may be in today's world, they weren't then. So this is the reason we need to highlight this and look at it in that perspective, not how we see things today.
You know how I knew? I was just reminded 2 weekends ago that we have jumped the shark as a society. I was watching a rerun of The Office. I wasn't aware of it at the moment, but it was on MTV. And I wasn't aware it was on MTV until right after that ended. A big disclaimer came up on the screen. It said something along the lines of, "This motion picture is dated and contains old school thinking and negative depictions of cultures that may not be suitable for today's viewers." And I'm thinking, ooh, what channel? I hit pause and I was like, what channel? Oh, MTV. And I didn't want to look at the movie title. I'm like, what? Are they getting ready to play Blazing Saddles? The movie that they're playing that was outdated and contains racist depictions of other people's culture came out in 1994. No, I'm sorry, 1997. Because Friday came out in 1996 and had Chris Tucker. That was his breakthrough role. This movie that MTV needed to put a warning up was a movie that came out in 1997 or 98, which at the time, a movie that had two leading actors of a minority persuasion was few and far between. It was Rush Hour.
Oh.
The main characters is an African American and a Chinese immigrant, Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. You have a movie with a black man and a Chinese stuntman, and they put a disclaimer up in front of it that it has inappropriate racial epithets. It's like, really? No, I mean, I went on to watch it, and there was, you had the stereotypical Chinese people with the cameras down in front of, in Hollywood taking pictures, everything with the Asian style music in the background. But it wasn't like the banter that they would say was considered inappropriate. It was Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan tongue-in-cheeky making fun of each other's cultures. It wasn't like it was, big glasses, buck teeth sort of thing out of the 40s. It's like, really? Rush Hour needs a disclaimer now? That's how sensitive we got. So I just looked at and laughed, and of course I watched the movie. But if someone came up to me and they're just getting into it, and I know this is going to annoy a lot of the diehard World War II living historians, the ones who like to throw the phrase bandwagon a brother out there. But I think Band of Brothers is a good way to get people who have no real foot in that water. Because one, it's chopped into hour-long segments. It's easily digestible. Two, the character development is done in such a way that it's almost soap operic. And I'm not saying that as a put down, but first 3 or 4 episodes of them at boot camp, they're building character development so you can learn who, by the end of the series, you give a shit when these guys get hit. When Garnier and Joe Toy lose their leg, it affects you in a way. And so, like, if you're a guy and the wife who really doesn't care about the subject, if she's, everybody who's married has the shows that you have to watch, quote unquote, by proxy. And so, if your old lady's watching, whatever, Housewives or Investigation Discovery, a lot of times you end up watching these shows by proxy because you're sitting on the couch with them. But I think a child or a spouse or someone who's really not into the theory of World War II or World War II themed stuff, just if they sit there and watch all 12 episodes, just the character development and the fact that these gentlemen really existed. And the beautiful touch about that I really wish they would have done on the Pacific was the interviews at the beginning of each episode with the survivors. Obviously, the Pacific was 15 years later, and a lot more of those guys had since passed away. But one of my favorite parts of that series is before the theme song, there's Lon Lung McClung telling what happens. That kind of leads up there's Dick Winters telling what happens. And so just having that, holy crap, that was the guy at the beginning. It really helps bring people into that mind state and piques their interest.
I completely agree with you, because my wife, if we don't watch Band of Brothers, we typically watch it around like late November into December. It's just like, it's become a tradition. I mean, we always watch White Christmas on Christmas Eve, and we just, as soon as it starts getting cold enough to where we'll build a fire in the fireplace,
mm-hmm.
I can't watch the Bastogne and the Foy episodes without a fire in the fireplace. Got to be cold, outside. And if we don't watch it, man, she'll start like jonesing for it.
That's awesome.
It is. And it doesn't matter how many times we've seen it now. The same scenes impact her the same way. She's still going to be crying. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's probably like the obvious. That's the one. I mean, I think Saving Private Ryan did that for a lot of people too. I remember seeing that in theaters and walking out, and it was just like, you could hear somebody blink across the street. It was just silence. Like, you just didn't even know. You'd never seen anything like that before in cinema. Now it's like, oh, whatever, who cares? I mean, kids growing up today, Saving Private Ryan wouldn't impress them, because this is in everything.
Yeah. I played Medal of Honor. I played Call of Duty World War II. I went through the landings. The one downside, if you want the person who's never seen Saving Private Ryan to keep that, I don't want to say naivete, but I want to keep the lust for it. When they look at you and say, "Is this based on a true story?" Just say yeah. Let them think that Private Ryan existed at least until 3 days later. And then you can explain to them, well, no, there's a paragraph in Band of Brothers about about a guy whose last name was Ninsky. He was the inspiration for this. Ryan didn't really exist, but there was a guy. They quickly found him. But this did happen, and then that will open up the doorway to explain about the Sullivan brothers. And that's why the Navy now no longer transports more, 2 or more siblings on one ship, because 5 of them died and 1 sinking. And so yeah, let's flip the script a little bit. Let's go worst. What is your opinion of a horrible World War II movie? And we don't have to go, obviously we don't have to go super cliche like they saved Hitler's brain, anything dumb like that.
The first one that comes to mind is Windtalkers.
Yes.
I just love busting on Windtalkers. And I know a guy who worked on it, and he'll be the first one to make all the windbreakers.
It's funny you bring that up, because there are 2 or 3 episodes back when I had a gentleman on out of California, that movie came up. There was I had 2 reenactors on that episode, and there was a younger cat on there, and he brought that up, and I was like, oh, and I just cringed.
Yeah.
Everything from him Nicolas Cage wearing his dog tags as a choker to just, and like, I feel so bad because I forget his name. the gentleman from California pointed out, I said, yeah, but the one good thing about Wind Talkers is it did bring recognition to the Code Talkers and to the Native Americans. He said, especially out in California and on the West Coast, where a lot of their families still live today, and, you know, people migrated around. He said at a lot of their events, some of their family members will show up, and so they were thrilled because, you know, they don't know any better, because they just, here's a cool story about my grandfathers. But as a reenactor and historian, yeah, that movie hurts my teeth. I watched it, the first time I saw it was when it came out, before I got into all this, and I didn't think it was a bad movie, and then I went back and I was like, ooh, yeah, not too much.
Same for me. I enjoyed it the first time I saw it, but that my son loves it, and it's just like every time he's watching, like, I can't look. You know,
I hate to put this on a worst. I don't think it deserves on a worst list, but for me, I'm not going to put this on a worst list per se. I'm going to put this on a list of not as good as I wanted it to be. And I even went back and revisited it, hoping that now that I knew a little bit more about the subject after I got into World War II, and especially the Pacific.
You can say Pearl Harbor. It's okay. You can say Pearl Harbor.
That's on the worst one. This one's straddling the middle, and this might be a little controversial statement.
Okay.
The Thin Red Line was not as good as it was supposed to be.
I agree. I totally agree.
I want so much more out of that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm looking at the screenshot of the trailer. They have the holly liners. Their uniforms are on point.
Yeah.
It just, the story didn't get me to where I wanted it to take me. The whole thing of him hanging out with the indigenous people, it was just kind of here and there. The plot, I don't know. It's just like the plot line was confusing.
I've seen it probably 3 or 4 times. I still couldn't tell you what the movie's about.
No.
I don't really know. And so let me tell you about that one. So a couple episodes ago, or I don't know, maybe it was the last episode, when we were showing off some of our artifacts, and I went into that Marine Corps, garrison cap and the Raider patch, the guy that gave it to me. So when did that movie come out? Like
Thin Red Line came out in 1998.
98, okay.
Here is the description real quick. Here is the description, and I could have never made this out. In 1942, Private Witt is a U.S. Army ambassador living peacefully with the locals in a small Pacific island discovered by his commanding officer, Sergeant Welsh, played by Sean Penn. Witt is forced to resume his active duty training for the Battle of Guadalcanal. As Witt and his unit land on the island, the American troops mount for an assault on an entrenched Japanese position. First and foremost, I never knew he was an ambassador. I just thought he was AWOL. I thought he said, fuck it, I'm going AWOL.
Yeah, wow.
He's an Army ambassador. No, I'm sorry. See, I can't read. He's an Army absconder.
Oh, okay.
Absconder. Why don't you say he's a gold brick or a layabout? So he's an Army absconder living peacefully with the locals in a small Pacific island discovered by his commanding officers. So say the guy's AWOL.
Right.
Don't call him an absconder.
So when I first heard about that movie coming out, I got so pumped because this is right around the time that I was hanging out with Bob Cloud, my neighbor, like every day walking up from school. He's telling me stories about Guadalcanal and all this cool stuff, and I'm thinking, man, Saving Private Ryan just came out in '96. Mm-hmm. So, and I remember when after Saving Private Ryan, I was like, man, I hope they do something just like this, but in the Pacific. Like that would be awesome. And then when it was Guadalcanal, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Yes. And then I had to ask him, I said, I didn't even know the Army was on Guadalcanal. I was a teenager. Like, really? The Army was there too? Even better. Oh my gosh. And then it was just like at the end, you're like, that's it. That's the movie. I know, man. That one.
In the cast in this thing, I mean, you got Sean Penn, John C. Reilly,
Jim Caviezel.
The guy who played in The Pianist, Adrian Brody. It's got John Cusack's in it. George Clooney's in it. Michael Rappaport's in this movie. It's got such a huge cast. I mean, it has so many people in this movie, and it's such a letdown. It's like, you want so hard to like this movie. And it's just like, come on. So it's not it's once again, it doesn't fall in my worst movies of all time, but it definitely falls in one of my biggest letdowns that I really want to like, but I just can't bring. Interestingly enough, it is listed on the Inquirer magazine's list of top 25 World War II movies. Just goes to show me that they're basing it strictly on cast and they don't know anything about World War II movies.
Wow.
Yep. So, did you list a bad one? No.
Well, the wind.
Oh yeah,
Windbreakers.
Windbreakers. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go with another favorite or quality.
12 O'Clock High.
12 O'Clock High.
Yeah.
For those who's never seen 12 O'Clock High, give us a quick little breakdown if you can remember.
So Gregory Peck and oh gosh, the guy that played General Waverly in White Christmas. It'll come to me. Anyway, the guy that plays General Waverly in White Christmas, whatever his name is, he's a major, and the movie was filmed in 1949, and it's kind of supposed to take place in 1949. He goes to the old air base, on a bicycle. He rides up there, and he finds, if you're familiar with the movie at all, there's a specific mug that they would have up on the fireplace mantle in the O Club. And when they turned the mug around to where it was like looking at the wall, that meant there was a mission tomorrow. And all the officers were gone. So he sees a mug, an identical mug in like this old antique store, and he goes, strikes a memory, so he buys it.
Talking about Gregory Peck?
Not Gregory Peck, the other guy.
Hugh Mallory?
No.
Gary Merrill?
No.
Well, these are like the main listing. Dean Jagger, Millard Mitchell.
Dean Jagger.
Dean Jagger. Okay.
Jagger.
He played Major Stovall.
Major Stovall. He was the guy from White Christmas. He was a general in White Christmas. And he's been in a lot of other things. But anyway, yes, Dean Jagger, his character, the Major. So he rides his bicycle to the old, air base there, and he walks up by one of the hard stands, and then all of a sudden, all that tall grass starts blowing, as if it's, prop wash from B-17. And then that's when he goes back to when he worked with Gregory Peck. And I want to say Gregory Peck played a brigadier general.
General Savage.
Yeah, General Savage. Okay, so, yeah, he kind of has to take over this group of guys that are they're worn out.
Go ahead. My daughter's interrupting. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And it's a fictitious bomb group. I think it's like the 918th, and he has to kind of turn it around. And they don't like him. He's a real hard case, and they're used to lounging around, whatever. And so he turns it around, and of course, Major Stovall is kind of witnessing all of this. He kind of plays his adjutant, so he kind of sees this turnaround as this new guy comes in, and but really, what it focuses on, it really was one of the first movies that was based around PTSD.
Oh, okay.
Because Gregory Peck becomes a victim of it, just like the rest of this bomb group. He's pushing them, and then he starts flying these missions, and then he just collapses. And towards the end, they're basically interviewing him, and he just kind of went flat crazy. And that's when they started seeing what they were doing to these young crewmen. They wanting results. General Aker wants this, and they want that, and they want this city, and they want to bomb this one. They want whatever. And Gregory Peck is, oh yeah, this is what we got to do. And then he starts seeing it firsthand, and he becomes a product of his own, regulations for these high standards he sets for this bomb group that he takes over. And so it's a really good flick. I mean, there's a lot of good action. And one of the neatest things about that movie, a neat little fact about it, is they actually had a guy who crash landed a B-17 strictly for the sake of the movie.
That makes me sad. What a waste of a plane.
Well, I mean, the way he came, he just belly landed. He just, landing gear up, and he takes out a few tents. He just belly lands in the grass, perfect landing. So, I mean, he probably didn't completely keep it from being airworthy, but
that makes me sad. That's a waste of a perfectly good GT.
Well, I mean, it's 1949. There's like 10,000 of them sitting in Kingman, Arizona at this time, right?
Yeah, I wish I had one.
But to do that for a movie, you got one take.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's pretty cool. And I really enjoyed the series. They came out with a series in the 60s, and you'll see Burt Reynolds and guys like that. Roddy McDowell will show up as guest stars, but I like that movie. That's a good one.
According to IMDb, the storyline in the story of the early days of daylight bombing raids over Nazi Germany, General Frank Savage must take command of a hard-luck bomb group. Much of the story deals with his struggles to whip the group into, quote, disciplined fighting unit in spite of heavy losses and withering attacks by the German fighters over their targets. Actual combat footage is used in the tense war drama written by K.C. Hunt. So that's kind of cool that this is another one of those movies that uses real war footage.
Yeah, it's a lot of footage from the William Wyler documentary he did with the Memphis Belle.
I'm going to go. I thought it was a cool movie. It's going to be going over to the Russian side. A lot of subtitles. I'm sure the reenactors amongst us will nitpick this movie apart. But I remember watching it before I got into reenacting and right after playing World at War, the Call of Duty series. And when you play the campaign mode on the Call of Duty series, there's this mission where you're a sniper and you're Citus Fountain. And you got to shoot some generals and take over. And I watched this movie called Enemy at the Gates, and lo and behold, that same exact scenario played out, and it's about this famous Russian sniper. And I can't remember his name, but I thought it was a pretty damn interesting movie. And it's not oftentimes that we have a World War II movie cast with Americans and Europeans portraying Russians and doing it pretty well. Are you familiar with that one?
I did. That is a good one. That is a good movie.
Let's see. Enemy at the Gates, 2001. For those of you who are Sons of Anarchy fans, it does have Ron Perlman in it. Jude Law plays Vasily. Let's see a real quick storyline breakdown. World War II and the fall of Stalingrad will mean the collapse for the whole country. The Germans and Russians are fighting over every block, leaving only ruins behind. The Russian sniper Vasily Zyatev, forgive me for slaughtering your name, but anyhow, he stalks the Germans, takes them out one by one, thus hurting the morale of the German troops. And he is a famous, I think he had some of the highest kills of any sniper on the Russian side in real life. Ed Harris is in this. Bob Hopkins, like I said, Ron Perlman. A majority of the people in this are, like I said, Americans or Europeans. And it's a pretty, once again, we don't see a whole lot of the Russian side of the war, especially as Americans. You know, we got a lot of D-Day stuff. We have a lot of the Pacific stuff now, not back then. We got some movies covering Africa, you know, the Desert Fox and all that stuff. A few, but very rarely do we see coming out of Hollywood, at least, a Russian portrayal of what happened on their side. So that's a good one that I recommend, especially if you want to switch things up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go. We'll do maybe one or two, and then we'll wrap it up. Give me another worst. What's a bad one for you? And now keep in mind, it can be, you know, not as good as you were expecting, kind of like I did with the Thin Red Line.
I'm trying to think of the name of it, and it was actually another John Wayne flick. And he's a sailor in it. I want to say it's maybe Kirk Douglas is a co-star in it. And
this is the worst?
It was just not. Maybe look up maybe it was In Harm's Way. It was just, I don't even.
Yeah, I think it was. In Harm's Way. Hold on. I really need a producer. In Harm's Way. 1965. Let's see. Yes, it had John Wayne and Kirk Douglas.
I think that's what I'm thinking of.
Let's see here. You know, it's so sad. IMDb, they have such a we don't want to offend anybody sort of ranking. When it, like, all their movies have like 7.5. So I want to go to Rotten Tomatoes, which has a more accurate kind of, if you will, rating system. I mean, if they think a movie sucks, they're going to tell you a movie sucks. In Harm's Way movies. There's actually 3 of them with that name. In Harm's Way, 1965. John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, Patricia Neal has 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is officially rotten. That's what the top critics. Audience score is 81. So the audience, the people who don't know a whole lot, they give it an 81%. They're not agreeing with Jeff, but the Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 38%.
Yeah.
Thin Red, just for fun, let's see what they give Thin Red Line.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's fresh with 80%, both audience and critics. Wow.
I just don't see it, man.
Yeah, the storyline for that movie, according to the IMDb, on patrol on the morning of December 7, 1941, while commanding a cruiser, Captain Torrey receives word of the attack on Pearl Harbor. His orders are to find the Japanese forces and to attack it. The film tells the story of 3 families during the outbreak of World War II. And was it just bad acting? Was it bad production value?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, it's tough to say that John Wayne was bad in it. It was just not very convincing. And I even want to say that there's they alluded to like a rape scene on the beach by Kirk Douglas.
Oh.
Like, it was just like, what are we doing? And actually, if I remember correctly, was it who played Nimitz in the old Midway movie? Was it Henry Fonda?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think he shows up in that one also playing Nimitz, which kind of blew me away because that's like 10 years prior to the Midway film. That was the best part of the movie. But yeah, it just not what I thought it was going to be at all. And
I'm not going to bring up Pearl Harbor because we all know it sucks. But for what it's worth, Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it out of 194 reviews, it's at 24%. Which is rotten, and the audience has it at 66%, which is barely fresh.
Yeah.
Now, I've talked in the past on here about how I wasn't a fan of The Longest Day. I don't know. I just thought it was not that great.
It's the longest movie.
Yeah. Well, and as we've said ad nauseum, my whole beef was that obviously the airborne helmets were horrible, but the fact that everybody and their grandmother, with the exception of John Wayne, carried a Thompson submachine gun meant he only one who carried an M1 was John Wayne because he needed to use it as a crutch. But that's not the one I want to bring up. I'm trying to. There was another one that I was going to kind of pull a not. It's not as bad as I want to say it was. What movie was it?
A Bridge Too Far?
No.
That was one that was slow going for me.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
What the hell was it? It was on the tip of my tongue. I had it all queued up when we were talking. I had it here in a list in front of me here.
I'll be honest. There's actually some pretty good movies that were made during the war.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Gung Ho is one that stands out to me. Randolph Scott. Guadalcanal Diary with William Bendix. Richard Jackal, of course. Richard Jackal is the 16-year-old kid in like every World War II movie for 20 years. Those are both pretty good. But, of course, like in Guadalcanal Diary, that they're T6 Texans with meatballs painted on them.
Yeah, but a lot of that stuff, especially the newer the movies, we have to kind of let some of that go just because of the unavailability.
Right.
This one isn't a horrible movie. This one I'm going to pull an audible and going to call the most disappointing post-movie research ever. And this will make sense here momentarily. Are you familiar with 2008's The Defiance? Defiance got, let's see here. It came out in 2008. It's 58 with the critics. Let me give you the rundown of Defiance on IMDb. Basically, it's about Defiance 2008. Here we go. This stars Daniel Craig, Liev Schreiber, Jamie Bell, who's another couple of names you might recognize on here. Here's a storyline. On the run and hiding in the deep forest of then German-occupied Poland, the four Bielski brothers find the impossible task of foraging for food and weapons for their survival. They live not only with the fear of discovery, contending with neighboring Soviet Palestines and knowing whom to trust, but also take responsibility for looking after a large mass of fleeing Polish Jews from the Germans and wartime machine. Now, this is based on a true story.
You lost me, dude.
Basically, you got four brothers who are running from the Russians. They're in German-occupied Poland. They're hiding in the woods from a bunch of Germans, right? They don't want to be conscripted into fighting and or going to concentration camps. And while out in the woods, they find a large group of Polish Jews hiding out because they don't want to go to concentration camps either, right? And as you can imagine, this true story, what happens is they steal guns. They kind of go full Robin Hood and Merry Men, where they basically scrounge up and become a band of militia members where they're fighting for their freedoms. They're fighting to survive. They kill some Germans, steal some guns, shoot some more, steal more. And so now they're armed Jews and Poles running through the woods trying to protect themselves. And it was a pretty interesting movie. It is what it is. But the reason I say it was the biggest post-movie research disappointment, the main character, played by, I think, Jamie Bell, because he's the youngest of the Bielski brothers, he went on... I did some research because whenever I watch these movies that are based on true stories, I like to find the photographs of the people who really lived. And it turns out one of these guys, obviously they're the heroes of the movies. They saved the Jews from the Germans and all that stuff. And I'm trying to find it here. One of them went on to pull in like a senior swindle scam in Miami, Florida. He was like robbing, taking advantage of old people, like taking their social security checks and like running off with his girlfriend. So here's this movie you just watch like for an hour and a half. These guys are heroes. They're saving the Polish Jews on the run from the Germans. And then one of these dickheads, when he gets to be like 6, he's out swindling people out of their social security checks and ends up going to prison. I'm like, oh, come on. You're supposed to be the hero. You're just an asshole that hasn't bloomed yet. It was so sad. I was like, come on, are you kidding me? Oh, it was so ridiculous. I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, it's just, I was like, oh, that's horrible. So let's finish it off on a high note. La, 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 la. Let's go with another good one that you would refer people to. What's a good movie that you would refer people to?
I love the Memphis Belle, man.
Or TV series.
I love the Memphis Belle.
Wasn't there two of them? The
Warner Brothers.
Okay, the one that came out in the late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, it came out in 1990. Yeah, not like the actual William Wyler documentary. But yeah, the movie. And, of course, we talked about that in the very first episode and I did. But, it's one that, if you got a girlfriend that kind of likes history or whatever, you make some popcorn, you watch Memphis Belle, she'll watch it with you. There's 1,000 movies out there that are good. So Memphis Belle, I'll leave it with that. But there's one more I wanted to mention because you did talk about the Holocaust.
Real quick, Memphis Belle, 67% with the top critics, 79% with the audience. For those not familiar, at the U.S. Army Air Force Base in England, the crew members of the B-17 bomber Memphis Belle prepare for their 25th and final mission into enemy German territory. Bomber Captain Dennis Dearborn, played by Matthew Modine, knows his mission is a dangerous one, but he is under pressure from the Army Public Relations Lieutenant Colonel, played by John Lithgow, to earn a decisive victory for the Allies so they can push more war bonds, is basically what it comes down to.
Right. I love it. There's a lot of familiar faces in that movie people are going to recognize. Of course, the kid that played Rudy is the ball turret gunner, and Harry Connick Jr., when he was, I guess, you could say at his prime musically.
Yeah, that was his first acting role. Prior to that, he was just a pianist.
Right.
And a crooner. Now, didn't you tell us on the episode we talked about this at length that the real crewmen thought it was important to use fictional characters in this movie because they didn't want to have the whole thing kind of shine on them? By using generic characters, it kind of gave credit to everyone who served, for lack of better words.
Yeah, and you can find that, you can read that, and Robert Morgan told me that himself. Because I asked him the same thing. I said, geez, why didn't – it was just, Robert Morgan, why is it Dennis Dearborn? And they still kind of made it like he was from he met – well, they made it seem like he was Robert Morgan in the fact that he's – his family had a furniture business, Asheville, North Carolina, even though – Matthew Modine talked like he was from Boston in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was named after his girlfriend that he met in Memphis on business, which is totally inaccurate. She's from Memphis, but they met in Walla Walla, Washington. But it was a loose enough, interpretation of a plane that a pilot named after his girlfriend. But, they changed the nose art. They changed the font, the way they wrote Memphis Belle on the aircraft. They kept the same markings. Other than that, you're going to have the same tail number, same aircraft identification letters on the side. But for the most part, the nose art and the name of the aircraft were completely different.
Yeah.
And all the names of the crew were different. And Bob Morgan said, it wasn't about us. It was about all the boys. It was about bomber crews, what they had to go through, and how it was important that, because the Memphis Belle, and we may have talked about this, like you said, at length in another episode, and it's okay if people want to go back and watch the episode.
Sure.
But there was no superlatives that were linked to the Memphis Belle that the Memphis Belle actually accomplished. It was not the first plane to fly 25 missions. It wasn't the first crew to fly 25 missions. Bob Morgan wasn't the first pilot to fly 25 missions in the 8th Air Force. Nothing about it was accurate. And that may have been some of the motivation behind Bob Morgan to say, look, we didn't really do any of these things. And lo and behold, his co-pilot was actually the first B-17 pilot to fly 25 missions.
He would probably tell you the only thing they did was happen to be the crew that ended up with a film crew flying with him in real life.
That's exactly what happened. And William Wyler actually he had a lot of footage from Hell's Angels, the B-17, and he just liked the look of the girl on the Memphis Belle. And he said, what's the deal with this? And then he meets Robert Morgan, who grew up with the Vanderbilts, super wealthy, super well-to-do, and
playboy.
He's a cocky son of a gun. He's a playboy. How do you give up a story like that? So you kind of had to fudge it. And it worked.
Sure.
It goes down its history. Doesn't matter.
It's like the closest thing. It's like you're tasked with producing this documentary, and you just stumbled across the closest thing to a Clark Gable in an Air Force pilot seat. Boom. There you go.
He hung out with Clark Gable.
Yeah.
If you read Robert Morgan's book, they used to hang out at night, down in London and stuff. So it was just too juicy for somebody like William Wyler to see the production value, and it didn't matter how many missions, and when you look at when you watch the footage, you think that William Wyler is filming the 25th mission over Wilhelmshaven, Germany. Not at all the case. I don't even think Wilhelmshaven was the 24th mission. It was like the 20. I don't know. You can look it up, but the footage, most of the footage that he took of the guys at the seat and at all their different, stations, I guess, if you will, was all done over England well after they were done.
Yeah.
They were done with all that. He took them back up and, got a close-up of all them at their battle stations. So
yeah, and all the radio, quote-unquote radio chatter was just done in a recording studio back in Hollywood.
Exactly. But who cares? It's a good movie.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch up just a little bit because I want to maybe annoy some people. Maybe that's something to generate us some emails to mailcall at WTSPWorldWar2.com. Sorry, not sorry. I went to the theater and saw Dunkirk. I'm like, okay.
I was wondering if this was going to come up.
I'm watching it, And now, I used to be a huge movie buff. Back in the 90s, I had a huge collection of VHS. I was early on the Kevin Smith train, all the Pulp Fiction stuff with Quentin Tarantino. I've watched Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, all these movies with the whole jump scene sort of thing where the timeline moves around. And I'm watching Dunkirk. And I'm like, okay, it's daytime. They're on the boats. And it's daytime, he's in the plane, but now it's dark. Is he flying through an oil cloud? The time-lapse thing just did not play out well. It just, to me, it seemed like a cluster F of trying to get what happened in that span of so many hours into a 2-hour film that it just wasn't done in a easily observable way. Because once again, I'm like, why is it dark? Is he flying through an oil cloud? I mean, from the boats being hit, it's just, I thought it was greatly overrated.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I did see that in theaters. It was cool how I got to see it because I was out in West Texas, outside of Abilene, for the 12th Armored Division reunion, and had the opportunity to take the M3A1 Stuart tank out there and drive it around, demo it, shoot the coax, fire a bunch of 37 Mike, blanks into basically their old chow hall that they've restored, where they used to, at the old rifle range and everything. Get to see these old veterans from 12th AD. And it just so happened that it came out that weekend. So we went into town and saw it. And yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of like a disclaimer at the beginning would have been nice. I didn't know what the mole was. And I didn't know anything about Dunkirk except a bunch of British dudes got pushed off the continent, and it didn't look good there for a while, And I think that was when – is that when Churchill kind of had his famous quote, like, this isn't the end? This isn't even the beginning of the end, but it's the end of the beginning. Yeah. So that's about all I knew about Dunkirk. But if they would tell you, like, everything that you see here happens in the span of a day, okay, cool. Now I would get it. I
know it may take people out of the immersion, but maybe a timestamp, because the problem is your pilots, obviously they have their mask on, right? It's hard to identify the pilots. And so when you have the navy of British civilians in their commandeered ships heading that way, and they come across the plane that's floating in the sea with the guy who's the lead role on Peaky Blinders is on this thing, you're like, was that one of the two main pilots? Is this a different guy? After they get him on ship, then you realize, he was that person, but how come it's still daytime there? But when they shot him, but when they just showed his buddy, it was still dark outside. And so the whole thing, the whole timeline just, I mean, it's hard to tell a story in a interesting way about a bunch of people stuck on a beach. The storyline was there. It's just the way they chopped it up
cinematically
and delivered it. If they had a different editor in there, and maybe production pushed the director a little bit and said, "Hey, let's," I don't know if they showed this to some people beforehand and did the survey, and I don't know if they what the hell they call that, but anyhow, they bring in just random people and have them watch it and get notes. But I don't know that if they would have just, I almost wish like the director's cut was re-edited, just a little more straightforward.
I think it was an interesting way to do it, and I think hopefully other movies will kind of adapt that way to tell a story, but just do it better.
Yeah.
Like, I think they just tried to kind of pioneer something that just kind of fell flat, Yeah,
it's just kind of like, here's a bowl of soup. It's up to you to figure out what the ingredients are and where they go. But, I mean, it is nice to see that story told, and it's always great to see new World War II movies with the modern day CGI and stuff. But, like, if someone asked me what's a modern day war movie that came out in the last, 5 to 8 years, I would say just go watch 1916. It's World War I. It was done in a much better way.
Yeah.
But I have not seen Jojo Rabbit. Have you seen that? I heard it's a spectacular movie. I guess it's kind of a comedy kind of way of going about it, but I heard that's actually really, really good. And but yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up that. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know some of your worst and best movies. email us at a mail call, WTSP WorldWar2.com. It's time to go anyhow because you can probably hear my daughter yelling at my dog. I don't know what's going on out there, but it's getting to be that time of day. Jeff, you got anything coming up going on in your future?
No. I'd like to talk about my trip out to Arizona and Pima County Air Museum. The next episode, I'll push some pictures your way. It's a beautiful museum out there in Pima County, just outside of Tucson, Arizona. It's a beautiful 5-building complex with one building that's just dedicated to the 390th Bomb Group with the B-17 in there. But there's everything from a Wright Brothers reproduction aircraft to an SR-71, one of JFK's Air Force One aircraft, a couple B-29s, everything in between. So I'd love to hit that up next episode. And
no, I know it's not World War II related too, but you went to Tombstone, did you not?
I did.
We can talk about that. So yeah. But definitely, we'll try to get another episode out next week. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Music, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever your fine podcasts are found. Or you can just find us like you probably already do at WTSPWorldWar2.com. I'm Don Abernathy, and for my co-host, Jeff Copsetta, we want to say thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we will talk to you all next week. Cool, man. Thanks.
Awesome. So next Tuesday, I'm going to a hockey game